Hello, my name is Midori Gonzalez, and today I will be discussing what makes a city feel like home, an investigation into the marginalization and inclusion of Hispanics in American urban planning. So to start, I will be giving some basic facts and information about Hispanics in the US. Hispanics have ethnic identities that are tied to Spanish-speaking countries. Many Hispanics are Latinos, meaning that they have ethnic identities specifically tied to Latin American countries. Among Hispanics and Latinos living in the US in 2019, about 33% are immigrants, while roughly 67% were born in the US. This group makes up about 18.7% of the US population and is a group that continues to grow rapidly. Hispanics are a historically marginalized and underrepresented group in American socioeconomic affairs, including housing, development, and importantly for this presentation, in urban planning. They have been excluded in ways that tend to allow non-Hispanic whites to profit and prosper more than Hispanics have been able to. Even though Hispanics have not had much political clout or influence throughout history, their influence on cities can be seen in the ways that they infuse their culture and values into their daily activities and their environment. The main idea here is that Hispanics adapt to American urban environments by creating a sense of place that reminds them of their cultures and the countries they have immigrated from, or if they were born here in the US, then similarly, the sense of place reminds them of their roots and culture and the places where their ancestors have immigrated from. Next, I will talk about marginalization and how that has affected the lack of inclusion of Hispanics in urban planning. So Hispanics and Latinos have been marginalized by segregation that has occurred through the processes of steering and redlining. They have also been displaced from their homes due to the expansion of surrounding areas, businesses, other pieces of land and development, and through urban renewal, which is when cities decide that they want to revitalize a city and change its identity, basically, and also through gentrification, which causes displacement usually by making things too expensive and therefore removing the culture and pushing out the people who live in the area because they can't afford it anymore. So even though segregation and housing discrimination are now illegal, the demographic patterns that they have caused still remain in the neighborhoods that were previously affected. Property values and housing costs continue to impact which homes Hispanics can afford. And many school district boundaries are actually drawn along the same lines that were previously on the redlining maps of the past. This means that schools can still have low levels of diversity, not enough funding for all of their programs, and lower quality education available to their students. Altogether, these present challenges for social mobility, which makes it harder for Hispanics to leave this dynamic that they've been stuck in for many years. The next thing that I'll discuss is representation and inclusion of Hispanics in urban planning. They traditionally have not been included in the planning process because they don't have a lot of political clout or influence. This is partially because of numbers and partially because of segregation and racism, as mentioned in the past, in the previous slide. Hispanics and Latinos are underrepresented in architecture, planning, and related industries, despite the fact that they make up a large and rapidly growing part of the US population. Architects and urban planners who identify with these ethnic groups feel a responsibility many times to represent their cultures and communities in their work. Many of them try to advocate for the needs of their ethnic groups and seek to raise awareness for Hispanic values, cultures, and the things that they require to live a comfortable life and to have um, normal rights and well-being and living standards. Even though planners must create opportunities for community involvement, Hispanics are more likely to have busy schedules that they cannot take time off of work or take time away from. Their obligations and commitments may prevent them from being available to participate in the crucial steps of the planning process. Some other things that can prevent people from participating in the planning process are that regardless of race or ethnicity, many community members may struggle to understand abstract or technical planning concepts, and they also might remain skeptical about the power of their voices or how much influence they really have. Furthermore, American urban planning tends to focus on values such as land use, structure, function, and economic benefits, rather than the cultural values of the various races and ethnicities living in the big melting pot that is the US. On the other hand, Hispanics tend to value walkability, community, family, and a feeling of home that reminds them of their roots and their cultures. So although Hispanics have not had a lot of representation in planning, they've still been able to influence cities. Hispanics create a special sense of place by using movable objects and decorations that make their houses feel like homes. In many cases, these objects need to be movable and temporary because a lot of Hispanics can only afford to rent houses and therefore can't make permanent changes to them. In many of the cases where Hispanics do own their own houses, they pave over their yards and sometimes add low fences to create environments similar to the plazas that are found in countries like Mexico. Families and friends often gather and socialize in these converted yards. Shops and businesses owned by Hispanics often have hand-painted signs and murals of cultural significance painted on the outside. And in cities with high concentrations of Hispanic or Latino ethnic groups, the street signs and business names may be named with words or places in Spanish. This is especially common in ethnic enclaves and border cities, and some examples include Little Havana in Florida and East LA and Santa Ana in California. These are some of the ways that Hispanics adapt to the US city environment by overlaying their aspects of their culture and their everyday lives to make things feel more comfortable and like home for them. In terms of their influences on urban planning, urban planners and city council members are beginning to take inspiration from the ways that Hispanics live and make subtle changes to their surroundings. Some of these changes include altering city ordinances to allow more murals and public art, street vending and food trucks, adding parks and expanded bike lanes to allow for increased walkability, and holding events of cultural interest or significance. Some examples include ciclovia, parades and festivals for Heritage Month, and celebrations for cultural holidays. Some ways that planners can increase community involvement of Hispanics and Latinos are by ensuring that there are translated materials or translators available, by holding events at more times for people with different work schedules, and by creating community building events that make residents feel more connected and empowered. Professionals who are in fields such as planning, architecture, and real estate, or any related fields that have to do with determining where people live and how they live, can show Hispanic youth what their jobs look like and why these are important roles in our society. Getting young Hispanics to be interested in these fields can inspire them to study them in college and to pursue them as careers. This would ultimately lead to the increased representation of Latinos and Hispanics in this part of the workforce and community. This would then allow for Hispanics and Latinos to make a much bigger impact in easier ways that are not so subtle. Overall, diverse groups of people and their adaptations and the things that they add to a city are what actually make the city feel like home. And to conclude, although Hispanics have been excluded and marginalized by planning, they have worked together in many different amazing ways to create a special sense of place that makes them feel at home. In doing so, they have built vibrant communities that are full of meaning. The subtle changes that Hispanics make in American cities are adaptations that allow them to honor their roots every day. Urban planners have been inspired to formally incorporate some of these elements into American cities, which ultimately creates more culturally rich, diverse, and creative environments for everyone living in them. Here are the sources that I used. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.